If I had to pick any of the lessons I learned in college that was probably the most valuable to me right now, it's probably hustling. My trip to Los Angeles, California was 100% an example of me using that skill. If you ever don't want to pay $3 for an 8-ounce bottle of water, just pack a empty Brita filter into your suitcase and check that bag. From July 19th to the 23rd, myself and composer Joe Jackson went to Los Angeles, California to make some connections in the entertainment industry while also fostering connections that we've already made online. This was also a really good opportunity for us to explore the area and see, is this somewhere we could picture ourselves living either as individuals or roommates post-graduation. Not to mention that Los Angeles is also one of the top 3 entertainment cities in the continental United States, so it was a really great opportunity for us to learn the area because at some point in our careers we're probably going to have to travel there, and it was good to get a head start as to what it's like. Earlier this summer I traveled to Nashville, Tennessee, and even though the cities are both within the same country and are only a few thousand miles away from one another, it's kind of amazing how culturally different they are. But before I go into telling you about our trip, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for getting us to Los Angeles. The James Madison University School of Music and a collection of private sponsors made this possible for us, and we could not be more thankful to you. They're actually receiving this video blog a week earlier than the public, and depending on the size of their gift, are receiving certain prizes by mail. So grab some sunscreen because we're going to Los Angeles, California. Getting to California was absolutely no problem. In fact, this is one of the smoothest flights I've ever been on. We were able to score a direct flight to California through a website called Student Universe where we got some pretty significant discounts. This is also where we booked our hotel room. If you're a student, it's a great website for looking for student discounted travel resources, like hotels and planes. The only thing truly significant about our arrival was the movie I was watching on the plane. My favorite movies of all time are probably the first 3 Spy Kids movies. I've had them on DVD for probably about 15 years, and I wanted something to entertain me on the flight, so I downloaded the first 2 to watch. It's not uncommon for me to want to watch a movie in Spanish, and I like to see the subtle differences between the translations. I've watched the first Spy Kids in Spanish before, but what's different about the digital copy is there's a scene in the movie that is not in the DVD copy. When Carmen and Junie are going to Floop's castle, there's a scene of them swimming through like a pod, a collection, something of sharks, a bunch of sharks in the water. And Junie like pees on a shark and it wakes them all up. I can kind of see why this was left out of the final cut of the DVD version. But I was working on the plane and I probably wouldn't have even realized because I was just listening to the familiar sounds in the background and it actually swapped to English. So this scene was actually not dubbed in Spanish. If you're a fan of these Robert Rodriguez films, I definitely suggest watching this scene and being like, so this is what it may have been like. Joe and I flew out of Washington Dulles Airport, which is a nice middle ground between my home in PA and his home in Virginia. It just made things much easier for us to get on that flight together. We stayed with my friend Jordan, who you might recognize from my trip to Poznan, Poland when I created the My Viola and presented that research in front of the International Viola Congress. Her family has always been so supportive and I'm so thankful to have them in my life. They're basically family now. When we got off the aircraft, there was actually this piano in the airport that you were allowed to play, and being 2 music majors, of course we weren't afraid to try. And you might notice that we are continuing to wear masks in the airport. It's actually under federal law right now that you must wear a mask on the aircraft and inside the airport. But Los Angeles County also reinstated their mask mandate while indoors 3 days before we went there. But of course I'm not complaining because I'm grateful we got to go there at all. Los Angeles is 3 hours behind Eastern Standard Time, and the time change actually worked in our favor because when we arrived, it was about lunchtime. This gave us plenty of freedom to get settled and to explore a little bit of the surrounding area before our dinner appointment that night. We stayed at the Westin in downtown Los Angeles, and that was actually a really good choice for us, not only because we got a significant discount through Student Universe, but also because you cannot enter upper floors without a room key. That might sound a little bit extra, but the reason that's important is because LA actually can be a little bit dangerous. And I don't think that information is surprising, and plenty of people warned us about that, but I just don't think we quite knew what to expect. There was one day that we witnessed 4 what I guess I would call crimes in 2 hours. We saw a woman's purse get stolen, a man walking around with no pants or underwear, A fight break out in the middle of a street where a man was assaulting a woman and pinning her to the ground. I had to call 911 on that one. And we also saw someone break out of City Hall, jump a fence as a police officer was chasing this person. We're very thankful that we didn't get caught up in anything. We knew it wasn't our business. I've been to plenty of cities in my life, and my biggest advice if something happens like that, call 911 if it's necessary, and if it's not your business, walk away. While downtown, we got to see Chinatown. We also got to see the Walt Disney Concert Hall. We went down to Little Tokyo and saw something called the Toy District, which is basically a bunch of merchandise from different animes. After getting settled and walking around, we actually had a dinner appointment from a family from my hometown in Pennsylvania. I've taught the kids music and I've worked on sound for some of the shows the kids have been in. And when I tell you these kids are some of the smartest you'll ever meet, I'm not exaggerating. The 10-year-old told me that night that she wanted to be an astrophysicist. These are some of the smartest and kindest kids I've ever met, and that family actually took us out to a sushi robot restaurant. I've seen a couple of these online, and I've never actually been to one, but they deliver sushi to you on a conveyor belt, and you can take whatever you want, but you can also order sushi, and it will be delivered directly to your table, and the conveyor belt knows where to stop. The other cool thing about this restaurant was as you ate, you could discard the plates into like this machine, and after a certain number of plates, it would play a little animation, and it was a storyline. And then once you reached another level of plates, you would actually win a prize, which were 2 Lego sushi rolls. Joe and I haven't put them together yet, but they were nice enough to let us have them. It was a wonderful dinner, we had wonderful conversation, and after that they surprised us to cupcakes. This family did not have to do this for us, but they took us to a place called Sprinkles, and I didn't know where we were at first, but after staying there for a couple of minutes, I realized what had happened. We were actually at the Americana in Glendale, which is where violinist Lindsey Sterling filmed one of her famous music videos, Master of the Tides, which is a video that I showed to almost all of my students regardless of what instrument they play. Needless to say, I was a little starstruck. There was even this fountain that's called the Dancing Fountain that plays music during the day, and at night there's lights that light up as the water dances all over the fountain. It was a great night, and I'm so thankful we got to see the family, and they really treated us with so much kindness. They didn't have to do that for us. The last thing we did before we went to bed is because we were only a few minutes down the road from DreamWorks, we decided to get out and take a picture in front of the studio. But what was fascinating about the DreamWorks campus to me was, if you've ever seen Shrek 2, Shrek 2 is based in Far, Far Away, which looks very much like Los Angeles or Southern California in general, but the castle that Fiona's parents live in looks very similar to me to the DreamWorks studios, and I wonder if that was a reference. Shrek 2 being a DreamWorks movie, I guess it kind of makes sense. Please do not laugh at me. We did what we had to do. This is where the hustling comes into our video. Neither Joe nor myself are old enough to rent a car officially. I made sure to do plenty of research before going on this trip, but nowhere did I expect to be paying $50 for an Uber one way. And yes, we did try some other apps and it was about the same. So Joe and I had to figure out how are we going to get around, because Uber's at this price, we're trying to go multiple places a day. We're going to be out $300 by the end of the day. And although Uber and Lyft are convenient, and fun fact, our first driver let us know that one time she drove Mary Kay Place, who was the mom in Sweet Home Alabama, we weren't prepared to be paying that much per ride. So our solution to not being able to rent a car and Ubers being so expensive, we decided to rent a U-Haul. So right now we are in a U-Haul pickup truck because neither of us are old enough to rent a car, but we're old enough to rent something that I think you might need a CDL for. We're being super safe right now. My hands are off the wheel because we're actually at McDonald's getting some breakfast. We just came from Nickelodeon Animation Studios. Not a lot of studios are giving tours right now in general because of COVID and because of a lot of just everything going on. So we can't get a tour right now. I have made some connections with folks at Nickelodeon, but it was cool to understand what the studio looked like and get a feel for the area surrounding it a little bit to see, could this be a place that I could picture myself either coming to work living in or doing both. So we got to see the side of the building which had a ton of portraits of some of the shows. We got to see a little bit of their courtyard, which I imagine is where people go for their lunch breaks or something, or maybe they wander around and do their work, but it looked really nice. It was just one of those cool things to see because, like, what kid doesn't know Nickelodeon? Every kid knows Nickelodeon, but how many people have been able to say, yeah, I know where they make the shows? I took time to read through the agreement, and I was of age and was able to rent the smallest thing they had, which was a gigantic 6'6" pickup truck. And actually, it turned out to be a really nice pickup truck. It was pretty much brand new. It had less than 500 miles on it, and it had Apple CarPlay. The seats were comfortable. It was a great little rental car. We had a lot of driving to do. We had to go to Santa Monica. We had to go to Burbank. We had to get back from those places. We had to do a lot. And the Uber cost $20 a day plus 79 cents per mile. And we did buy every scrap of insurance that we could get for it. Turns out we didn't really need to do that because our car insurance would cover a lot of it. But because it was my first time driving in LA and it was our first time driving a pickup truck, I was not going to play any games. I even had Joe record every ride that we took in that thing just in case there was some type of incident and we needed evidence on document. All that being said, when it was time for us to return the U-Haul at the end of the day, because we could only rent it for 24 hours at a time, it was really easy to return it, and we did Uber out of that neighborhood because it was in a more sketchy area. But I'm willing to drop $10 if that means that we're going to be safe on our way back to the hotel. But that U-Haul was great for what we were able to do during our second day in California. We were making our way down to Santa Monica, and even though it's not technically on the way, it was in the direction of Nickelodeon Studios. I've made some connections at Nickelodeon, and in the event that I end up working there, I wanted to see what it was like in the area. It was kind of funny because Nickelodeon was like in the middle of a neighborhood. There was a McDonald's close by, there was a laundromat. It just looked like a normal place as opposed to DreamWorks, which felt very secluded. Obviously, we couldn't go in or anything, but we could peer through and look at the courtyard and look at the gate and just kind of get a general feel of the area. We spent our morning at Santa Monica, which is right at the coast of California, and just so you know, Californians don't seem to want to do anything before noon. Everywhere we went on this trip, nothing was open before noon, and nobody was around before noon. We got to see the ocean, we got to see some vendors there. This was where our trip kind of turned into a hybrid vacation for us. We did pass by this local painter, and I don't typically buy a whole lot of souvenirs, but I really liked his paintings. I talked to him about his paintings and then decided I would think about buying it and come back, and then he was gone when we came back, but we did see him on the boardwalk, and I got to talk to him a little bit about his story and where he began painting, kind of artist to artist. Rogelio gave me permission to share his story with you, and he came over from Mexico and has been painting for 22 years. He's been doing these amazing variations of his art, some at daytime, nighttime, midday. His work is mesmerizing to me, and I'm really glad that I got to get one. Unfortunately, what I wasn't expecting upon returning was the paint to melt in my suitcase. It's not ruined, but it's definitely not in the state it was when I bought it. But I'm really glad the glass didn't break because it's actually layers of glass that are put together. And when I tell you I stuffed so many clothes in such a way to make sure the glass didn't break, at least the glass isn't broken. On our way out of Santa Monica into the University of Southern California, we decided to stop by this burger place that everyone had been telling us about. It's called In-N-Out Burger. I try not to say things I don't mean, and I'm not going to lie and say that the burger was the most incredible burger I've ever had, but the shake was really good. And the prices were pretty decent. A lot of people told us, before you go to LA, be prepared financially because everything's going to be super expensive. And actually, the most expensive thing for us was transportation. Food was kind of the same, especially if you were going to the chains. After Santa Monica and getting out of a parking garage that I thought we were going to get stuck in because the U-Haul was so big, we decided to make our way to University of Southern California, which is a school that Joe is very seriously considering, and I thought it would be a good idea for me to take a look at it as well, and we met his connection, Tristan, there. Tristan is a composer just like Joe, and seeing them get to talk shop was like watching two kids in a candy store. We stayed there for a few hours and explored the campus and tried to get an idea for Joe of, does this place feel right? And is this somewhere I could see myself? We passed by sound stages and other venues on campus that were named after some pretty big names in the film industry, including John Williams. Unfortunately, the music buildings were under construction, so we weren't able to go in. In fact, we couldn't go in much of anywhere because of some of their protocols on campus, but we were able to get a general feel for the outside. So once Joe and Tristan were done and we were done kind of exploring USC, we made our way back to Glendale one more time so I could get a more clear picture at DreamWorks. And don't worry, the security officer on duty let me know that we weren't causing a problem by taking a picture. Because it was so close by, we also decided to stop by the Americana once more to see it in daylight and kind of understand what that area was like. I think Glendale might be my favorite place that we visited in California. Joe and I might be grown men, but we decided that we were not going to be walking around a whole bunch at night, so we decided to go home and return the U-Haul and eat some food. It had been a pretty long day because we had to get up early in the morning to get the U-Haul, so we were pretty much done by that time at night. Besides, we actually had some administrative work to do, like making our connections on LinkedIn or by email and setting up appointments for the rest of the week. So day 3 was our day to go to Hollywood. We got up early, we rented the U-Haul, and we made our way up. Hollywood is the place with all those stars on the street called the Walk of Fame. And there's tons of attractions like being able to see the Hollywood sign from the Chinese theater, or tons of shops. Now, of course, Joe and I didn't go to Hollywood to go shopping, so there wasn't a whole lot for us there, and a lot of the stores actually were selling the same basic things. It reminded me a lot of Times Square in New York because there were characters on the street asking to take pictures with people. And Joe and I decided to dress up that day because we thought, what a great opportunity for pictures in Hollywood, but that's when I realized I forgot my SD card. Around the corner was Capitol Records, and we decided to explore that after Chick-fil-A, and we couldn't go in or really even get near it, but we were able to pass it because Capitol Records is one of my favorite record labels because of some of the artists that they actually have signed, some of them being like, I don't know, Tori Kelly, my favorite artist of all time. After lunch, it was time for us to make our way back to our hotel because we needed to connect with Everett Oliver, who is an international voice director and voice coach. We connected a while back, but Everett actually has a lot of connections in the industry. He was kind enough to already start getting me connected to folks and give me a little bit of advice on my career. So I decided, let's take him out for lunch. And he was so helpful. He decided that he would drive us. I think the most challenging part of this day was parking the U-Haul in downtown Los Angeles because of the clearance not being big enough for our truck. And Everett insisted on driving so that he could show us around the area. We had lunch, learned a lot from him, got to talk to him, and he's just a super cool guy to be around. There's a lot of energy and, well, in fact. So we just got lunch with Everett Oliver, an amazing voice acting director and coach. He has had an amazing past career and experience, and we got to learn a little bit from him today. And he taught us this new phrase. What was it, Everett?
Hold on to your good wig!
Hold on to your good wig! Because he's a great driver, and getting through LA can be pretty tricky sometimes. So thanks so much for meeting us today,
So
Everett.
wonderful. And they brought their resumes, and it's in the back.
It's in the back. Nobody touch our resumes. They're very important.
They're very important. I'm working the system for them.
Thank you, Everett. We definitely appreciate you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Everett and I met through a mutual connection to DreamWorks, and it's very interesting in the entertainment world because the connections you make might not work in the same way that a corporate ladder would. In this industry, sometimes you work for people, and those same people may one day work for you. It all depends on the projects that you're pursuing. So it's important that you try to make genuine working relationships and professional relationships, but also care about these people as people. It's kind of hard not to care about these people as people because usually they're very colorful and have a lot of energy just like Everett. It was a great opportunity to reconnect with him, and then it was time for us to meet our next connection that evening in Anaheim. Now, we had a little bit of time to kill, so on our way to Anaheim, which also happens to be where Downtown Disney is, we decided to spend a little bit of time there. Downtown Disney is not one of the parks. It's just a little shopping area that you can go for the $10 parking fee and shop around a little bit. They have some pretty exclusive merchandise, including those lightsabers that are in the park that you can custom build. And although we were not going to drop $300 on a lightsaber, we did enjoy some ice cream. And of course, there were plenty of other cool things in the store, and I wish I could have bought a million of them, including the Baby Yoda that we saw in there. It says, "Try me." and we saw this big poster of Luca, which is now one of my favorite films. And it was time for us to end our time at Downtown Disney and make our way over to Panera to meet my friend Riley that I'd met on LinkedIn a while back, and we were meeting him tonight to have dinner. Riley is a Nickturn, which means that he has a lot of Well, I guess I could just let him tell you. All right, so we're getting Panera with my friend Riley over here, who is a Nickturn this year, and tell him a little bit about what you do for Nickelodeon as an intern.
Yeah, I mean, I help out with all of the different fields. I help out with production. I help out with records. It's a lot of putting organization between assets. I work on a 3D show, so making sure that the people that are animating know where the assets are, know where to download them, and what to reference into the different scenes. Yeah, and just pretty much helping out whatever the production needs.
So after all that, it was time for us to call it a night again. We returned the U-Haul, and then it was time to go home. Our trip was short, and on our final day, we didn't really have any appointments made, so we decided to go to Universal Studios. And you might be asking, wait, David, wasn't this a business trip? Yes, it was, and here's why Universal is part of our business trip. I've also been connecting substantially with people from parks, Disneyland and Universal, to kind of understand what responsibilities are available in certain jobs. What attracts me to theme parks is the combination of entertainment and customer service. I know I'm an entertainer, and in some places you get to be a teacher. I'll talk about that here in a second. But you also have to make people happy, which is something I'm good at. One thing I could really see myself doing is doing one of the tours of the Universal Studios lot, which is exclusive to the California version of Universal Studios. And when I tell you this experience was riveting, I've got tons of clips that I'll include at the end of the video, but my favorite things were the automated earthquake, the automated flash flood, all these different sets that have been used in famous movies, including where they shot the movie Jaws and Bird Box. And we got to witness all different kinds of special effects and sets from really famous films. We actually learned a lot on this tour too, because we learned some of the terminology for cars that are on set, also known as picture cars. We also got to learn how different kinds of houses work and how they're designed to look like houses, and the inside might not be a house at all. That seems fairly obvious, but there were some details included in that were really fascinating to learn about. I wish I could spend a whole nother 20 minutes on that tour alone, but it's time for us to move on. While in the park, I talked to tons of employees there, some of which I connected with on LinkedIn prior to going to the park, and I also went to guest services to talk to them about the opportunities there. Now, you might think to yourself, is it possible to get real, honest answers while someone is on their shift? And honestly, I think I did get some honest answers. When there weren't a ton of other customers around and I would say, okay, tell me honestly, what do you like and dislike about your job? I got honest answers. And the overall feeling I got was that it's a positive working environment. One thing I wish I could do, but definitely cannot do, is be a stunt person for Waterworld. A lot of people at Universal Studios are like real professional actors, some of which who have been on Grey's Anatomy, American Horror Story. I'm blanking on a whole lot of other ones right now. But the stunt shows were absolutely incredible. I mean, people were falling off maybe 40 to 60 feet platforms into water. There were like guns going all around the place that made people look like they'd been attacked and fell off of platforms, and speedboats and fire, and it was kind of a lot to take in, but I mean, it was spectacular. I could totally see myself being one of those tour guides after having worked in radio. And of course, no trip to Universal Studios is complete without butterbeer. Don't worry, Mom, it's non-alcoholic. Butterbeer is one of my favorite drinks, and my caloric intake was skyrocketing that day. I had one regular, one frozen, and then half of Joe's because he wasn't a big fan. After being there, talking to a bunch of people who work there, and then eventually just enjoying the park, we decided it was time to go home and start getting ready for our flight in the morning. And that's it. After such a short trip, we decided to use every second of daylight that we possibly could to get the most out of our experience. If we ever go back, I'll make sure to allocate a little bit more money for transportation. And I'd actually like to make a few more plans in the neighborhoods surrounding the city, because unlike a lot of US cities, The activity is not downtown. Lots of people don't go downtown. Everett let us know that nobody goes downtown. It's actually in the outskirts. I'd also like to make a few more connections to the music industry as I'm still connected there, and that might be a good option for me as well. I'm definitely not complaining about how we spent our time because I felt like it was really well spent, but these are just things I'd hope to see in the future if we ever go back. Once again, we want to thank our sponsors. You guys are the reason that this was possible, and we are so thankful for your support. And if you want to watch my video on my trip to Nashville, make sure to check that out too. You can always find it at davesimons.net. Make sure to follow me and follow Joe as well. Thanks for watching, and only time will tell what's going to happen next. See you later. I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of these clips are going to be from our trip to Universal Studios, and specifically the Universal Studios tour, because this was an exclusive part of the Hollywood version of Universal Studios. Like right here, we are looking at a plane crash from War of the Worlds, which actually is a real plane that Universal Studios owns, and they designed it to look like it had crashed. They even have emergency vehicles and obviously some smoke coming out of it and broken everything. And this even made me feel just a little bit panicky because of how realistic this really was, even though I know it was meant for a movie. They also have this blue screen in front of this, I guess you could call it, pit where Jaws was filmed. They filled this up with water to make it look like an ocean. And we even saw these books inside of the Simpsons Cafe Krusty Burger because these are actually episode titles, and it took me a moment to get that. And then we have over here where we went to Waterworld, some amazing stunts, and this guy throwing water onto the audience members because he asked, "You think you're really going to get wet? This is what it's going to be like." Being the animation lover I am, we went to the Illumination ride where you could become a minion. I love Despicable Me. It's very special to my family. And inside you can see tons of references to the movie, including some of the props that were used, like the freeze ray and this portrait of the bank teller and the cannon and all these different things. And they even made it look like the girls wrote on the walls or drew on the walls. And it looked really cute and actually a little bit realistic. I really felt immersed in that experience, getting to be part of the Despicable Me ride. And there were tons of encounters around the park that we didn't really have time to do, but we could watch from a distance, like the Raptors or Megatron, and I assume these are animatronics. I did get to talk to Donkey, however, and that was a lot of fun, but we didn't have a whole lot of time to spend on that. I saw a poster for Gabby's Dollhouse. I know some people who are working on that preschool show. And then we saw a ton of what are called picture cars. Picture cars are cars that are used in movies. Obviously, they look like they're smoking, or they look like they've been damaged, or some of them are made to look very specific to a film. For example, I'm thinking of Fast and Furious or some of the Jurassic Park films. And here's Joe being spat on by a dinosaur. There was a lot of dinosaur spit on this tour between King Kong's Skull Island and Jurassic Park / Jurassic World. We've already seen this clip, but I just thought it was so cool how they can control the special effects here on this tour. For example, this flash flood that occurs in what I can't remember what I think was called Little Mexico. And they also did an earthquake for us later in the trip. And although this next clip does not contain any special effects, I thought it was pretty neat that they can make a whole town or a whole village and make it look like a real place. Even though they might change some of the scenery, they showed us how they can change Little Europe to look like Italy, Germany, Great Britain, and just change subtle little things on the same exact buildings to make it look just a hair different. This is actually where the earthquake took place, and this was before the earthquake occurred, and this is it starting, but I guess I shut off my camera. And then we came over to one of the sets of Jaws, and they actually had a little demonstration of a plastic shark that would come up to you. And is it really Universal anything if something does not explode? Right after this, the shark came up to the right side of the trolley, and I'm just really glad that I was sitting in the center because a lot of the things that would spray water at us or jump out at us weren't very close to me. This poor girl sitting beside me had to deal with like my screaming all the time, but that was fine. She was cool with it. And this is just an example that what you see on the front side of a house on TV might not be the same on the back side. It might just be the front of the house. And this is a soundstage. One of these was where Bird Box was filmed, which is one of my favorite all-time films. I think it's so fascinating. And there were actually some students there this day, and I remember they said that they were filming a new version of Saved by the Bell. So there were some kids on campus. Of course, here's the Bates Motel from the movie Psycho. Classic film. Here's some production crew walking to the next part of their set. I thought that was cool to see real production crew. And of course there are our little friends, the Minions. And these are the bungalows. The bungalows were told to us to have been dressing rooms in the past, and this is just more of their metropolitan landscape, and we got to see some clips from where those landscapes were used in the films. And of course, here's Skull Island. This is where we got to see King Kong and the dinosaurs from that movie, and that was a pretty immersive experience. It was CGI, and we got locked into, like, I'm not sure what you would call this, some type of bus lock thing, and we got to experience what it would really be like to be on Skull Island. And of course, there's one of our trolley cars that was attacked by a dinosaur and thrown off the edge of the cliff, so it's smoking now. These are some more picture cars from some pretty famous films, including some of the Back to the Future series. We even got to see some of these cute little cars from the live-action Flintstones movie, and I just think they're so adorable. And we have a couple of vehicles from the Jurassic series as well, including that one from Jurassic World that most people will recognize from the most recent movies. One of the most fascinating parts about going to a theme park, to me, is seeing how is the theme park entertaining its guests while they are waiting sometimes like 90 to 100 minutes just to get on a very famous ride. For example, at Hogwarts, you can see all these different pictures, you can see props from the movies, you can see shows that are happening outside, you can see all these different references to the franchise. And the coolest part about that is, while those are going on, they might loop, but they have a few different loops to keep the people who have been there for a little while entertained. So it doesn't feel like you're just sitting through the same thing every time. They actually have some different things going on so that you don't get too bored while you're waiting in line. And of course, we got to try some of our spells in these different windows. These are actually pretty hard to see. They were really cool in person, but just because of the glare on the glass, it's really difficult to see. We got to see Krusty Land. I like The Simpsons. I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but I do think it's funny. And then we also got to pick our own wands. I ended up with an Ivy wand, and Joe picked out a replica of Dumbledore's. And of course, we got those from Ollivander's, the best wand maker there is. And fun fact, the water bottles of Universal employees are even uniformed to what they are wearing as a uniform. And there's me patting Anxiety Mickey. Pat the butt. Fat pet. So right now, I am standing in Universal Studios Harry Potter's... Oh wait, what is it called? So right now, I'm standing in front of Universal Studios, The Magical World of Harry Potter. We went in this castle this morning. One reason we came here was beyond enjoying the park on our last day. I've actually been talking to a lot of management teams and a lot of different people about their experiences working in a theme park, because production goes past music, animation, film. It can even be in a theme park, and I like the way that the customer service aspect of the theme park meshes well with the entertainment aspect of the theme park as well. Additionally, this morning we took a tour in Universal Studios of the actual Universal lot. We saw places where they were recording movies like Fast and Furious and Bird Box. Even though Bird Box isn't technically a Universal film, it was still really cool to see the lot that they shot that on. Additionally, we saw how a lot of special effects were made, including earthquakes that felt really real to us, and fires and natural disasters, all different kinds of things. We even saw where Jaws was filmed and how they made that happen. So let's talk a little bit more. So we're going to enjoy the rest of our day here at Universal, and I think there's a bunch of kids behind me doing something. But we're just going to try and enjoy the rest of our few hours here in Los Angeles, California, and right now, Hollywood.